Welcome back to the Greenhorn Photo Taker. Today I'm in Malin Dickerson Reservation in my hometown, basically my backyard, a place I know well, of course, to really reflect upon my work in 2020. Obviously it was an odd year, and I think it changed my photography a bit, both for ill and for good, and I want to get through that. So some self-awareness critique, plus at the end a few minutes on my 10 best photos, what I did right, what I did wrong, where I can improve. So the first instance where I need to improve is my self-awareness. If I look at a photographer, a local photographer, someone like Kim Zier that I follow on Instagram, I'm in awe of so much of her work. And the issue I have is I go to some of the same locations that she does, and I am nowhere near replicating her style or her work. And I need to be more self-aware of my own skills to get to where she is, or even worse, if I want to get to where she is. And what I mean by that is I'm more of a natural looking photographer, not these good looks, but just in the scenes. I want to be as close to what my eye sees in my work. But perhaps Kim is more of a digital fine art, maybe not fine art, but a digital photographer, where she edits much more actively and forcefully than I do. So maybe I don't want to become her. I can admire her work, but maybe I don't want to become that type of photographer that she is. My issue is I just don't know. I look at her work and I love it. I try to replicate it and I don't know how. So I really need to be more self-aware of what options there are for me in order to know where to improve. The second area of critique is really with self-incrimination. So I know I can do better with compositions, understanding of light, and really how hard I work to get in the field. So tackling that last one first, that's the easiest one for me to fix. I often use the excuse of I have to go to work, or the excuse of, I'd rather do something with one of my kids, which I would, but there's really time for both. That forces me sometimes to not want to get up early or stay out late, or for whatever reason maybe not want to go on a 10-mile hike to a great location. But that's something that I can improve, and I'm actually working on right now. In terms of being a little bit more physically fit will help as well. So that is the one thing that I can easily do right now to change, is put a little bit more hard work into it. The second area of self-incrimination is really my composition work. I rush everything. I get to a location, and if you watch these videos for a while, you've seen me. I move my tripod from spot to spot constantly, maybe with a minute of composition work in between before I give up. Obviously that's terrible. What a way to go about your business. So I know with compositions I need to spend more time. I need to be less distracted. I'm often thinking of the weather, or what I'm having for dinner, or an issue going on at the office, what have you. So paying more and really working hard at compositions will help me a lot. The third one, I'll be honest, I'm at a loss at times. I understand what light is. I understand that good light is better for a shot, but I can't predict it. So many times I get home from a shoot, I look at my pictures in my editor, and a scene or a shot that I disregarded in the field turns out to be my favorite, and it's almost always because of the light. And I can see it after the fact when I'm looking at my screen on the computer during the editing process, but I can't see it in the field. Obviously I'm not talking about a gorgeous sunset or golden hour or blue hour, right? Those are easy to spot and easy to work with. It's when you're in a more subtle environment, understanding that light, I think, will help me as well. The next area of improvement surrounds self-pity. And what I mean by that is, I feel that I've been to every one of the great locations that are within a day trip of my house, right? I know every waterfall, every vista point that I could comfortably drive to, hike, drive home, and still have a life outside of photography. So that's just not true, obviously, right? the 100 square miles away from my home, I've not explored fully. But I use that excuse that I've already been to so many locations as a reason why sometimes my photography hasn't improved. Hasn't improved in terms of a shot that I like on Instagram, right? Which is a whole other issue. So this is just not true. I know there are places to explore that I've not been to. I mean, the vast majority of places around me I've not been to, but I still use that as a crutch. So I have to stop doing that as well. It's okay and probably good for me not to always want to shoot the 5 famous waterfalls in the New Jersey, PA, New York area. So that's another thing I want to work on in 2021. And the last area of concern is self-indulgence. By that I mean gear. I moved to the APS-C format with Sony this year, spent some money on the body, a couple of lenses, a backpack, some filters, and I love the camera, and I would never change. I really wouldn't go back. Well, maybe that's another video for another day. But it's improved my photography, but not by leaps and bounds, right? If I go through my favorite shots of my career since maybe 2015, 2014, so many of them are still on a 1/2-inch sensor with an old bridge camera. So obviously, given that scene, a bridge camera versus this versus full frame or even a medium format, you choose the better gear. However, you can get great pictures with any style body. So gear is only so important, and I have to remember that. If I'm not filling up carrying my tripod and my body, I should just take out my old bridge camera, strap it to my shoulder, and go out for an afternoon, and I would still be able to take great shots and still improve my photography by just getting out in the field and working at it more often. So what am I to do about it? I liked what I did towards the end of last year. I dabbled a bit in macro photography and wildlife photography and even a few days with astrophotography, and I loved it. And I think what that helped me understand more than anything was a little bit better understanding of light, especially with the macro. Light was so important there, and repositioning lamps around the house and even buying a digital lamp itself just for the sole purpose of macro photography helped me understand that. I need to continue to diversify a bit while I'm still learning, and not just pigeonhole my learning into what happens while you hike with a camera. There's so much more to photography than that I don't understand because I never went through the basics. So obviously shooting more, shooting with an eye towards learning, and then just making sure that I try different things will help a lot. Okay, let's take a look at my 10 best shots of the year. So I say best, but some of these are also my favorite shots. Maybe they're not technically as good as something else that I took, but perhaps I worked harder at it, or it was a great moment in my life that also corresponded to that picture. So let's get into it. This first shot was a really close-up of the bottom of Buttermilk Falls, and what I love about this is you can't really tell the scale of the falls in this picture. These are actually the tallest falls in New Jersey. I think well over 80 feet. I'll put the real height at the bottom of the screen, but on this day it was down to a trickle, so I just focused on the bottom. I love the red rocks in the foreground, the green moss obviously, and just the little trickle on the left hand side really worked for me. And obviously if you haven't been there, you can't tell the scale. Normally, I think that's a bad thing, you know, especially in epic landscape photography. You want that little person somewhere so you can see the scale. But in something like this, I like the idea of someone looking at the picture and not quite understanding how big it is until they looked around and saw some weeds or saw something that would give it a little bit of scale. However, I did make a mistake. So the top part of the falls, you can see a little bit of the white, you know, from the upper ledge. that shouldn't be in the shot. I should have either raised my camera to capture the stream in full, or lowered it to eliminate that as well. And then I mentioned the weeds, but that patch of weeds on the upper left, that does not work for me as well. And that goes to what I spoke about earlier. It's rushing a composition can lead to an imperfect final result. This next shot I love and hate, and I don't know why. Well, I think I do know why. This is of the Delaware River from Cliff Park during a morning sunrise. So this is so peaceful to me, and it is true golden hour. I like how the river cuts through the frame. I like the morning glow on the cliffs in the background on the right hand side. I even love the clouds in the sky, right? There's something about them that just give it character. But I know in my heart, if someone, and I'll mention Kim again, if she took that picture, the result would be entirely different. So that's just where I struggle with it in my own process. I love what I see, but I just worry someone else could be doing a better job. This next photo is here in Mainland Dickerson. It's of Saffin Pond, and I really love it because I worked hard for it. Over about a 6 or 8 week period, once a week I would go to the pond, look across it, and look at the trees you see in the foreground. Not the foreground, call it the midground. Those few trees standing up there, I've been waiting and waiting for them to slowly turn and start to show their fall foliage. And I had hoped, and I was right, that they would turn before the forest behind it, giving it a little bit of depth and standing out. And then the day I was there that took the shot, there was some beautiful light as well. You can see that one yellow tree here is lit up perfectly by the sun's rays. So I really worked hard on this one, and it was a true success. It's probably, well, one of my top 3 photos of the year, easily, both because, hey, it's my own, hometown. I worked hard at it, and the results I'm very happy with. But I could have still done better. Because I'm not familiar with my gear, I still am not, I missed the best light. There was a portion of time where all of these trees were all lit up at the same time, and it was stunning. It was after a rainstorm, and you know how you get those just patchy sun rays that hit just certain parts of the scene. Well, those trees were lit up, and it looked great. However, I missed it because I was messing around with my gear, not sure how to turn something on. I forget what it was. But overall, great picture, but still, I know it could have been better. This next picture I also adore. It might just be me, but this is in Crater Lake, New Jersey. And I spotted this from across Crater Lake. This was taken with my 70 to 350, zoomed fully in. It's almost 550 equivalent in full frame, so I'm truly zoomed in as far as I can go. And I had spotted this dead tree as I was making my way around the lake, and was just waiting for the right composition around it and behind it. And I found it, right? There's almost 3 layers to it. You have the white bark of the dead tree, then the green foliage of the trees behind it, and then surrounding that green tree and behind it is this wonderful yellow. And even the foreground, or I should say the base of the tree, not the foreground, I love that as well. It really works for me. It was composed well. Now, where I can improve and where I struggle, one of my favorite aspects about this, it almost looks like a painting, right? It's not, you'd have to look at that closely to realize, is it a painting or is it a real picture? And I'm exaggerating, obviously you can tell it's a real picture. But I can't replicate that look in any other shot, either on that day or since. And I don't know what I did in the editing process to make it look a little bit more ethereal, maybe that's the word I'm looking for, not a painting. And I want to know how I did it. And I've gone through all my settings, and I can't replicate it. So there was something about that instant, maybe it was the light, maybe it was not, that made this picture stand out. This next shot was very early in the morning on a nice 300-mile day trip up to the Catskills. And it was the day or the week that a lot of the California forest fires had, their smoke had gotten caught in the jet stream and really made it all the way to the East Coast. And it really looks surreal to have this thin layer. You couldn't tell it was smoke, but it really changed the atmosphere around, especially in the morning, and especially on this morning where there was also fog in the area. So that's what's making the sun look like this crazy golden orb that really stands out. So what I like about it, obviously the sun. I like these trio of gatherings of bushes or trees that stand out, right? You have to look a little bit deeper into the photo and you can see the shadow or silhouette of them in the background. And of course the boardwalk, how that meanders right into the center of frame. I like. What I don't like, the boardwalk itself comes right out of the corner of my picture. Yeah, it's kind of like tacky, right? Maybe tacky is not the right word. I think there needs to be a little bit of room there and have it either come up from the side or the bottom, not the corner. And of course, to do that, I'd have to move it to the right, which would eliminate this terrible. The bottom right-hand portion of this picture is a dead spot. There's nothing of interest there. Tall grass and short grass. So a little bit of work there. I think maybe I could have moved the whole picture to the right and that would have been a better composition. The sixth picture was not so long ago, and I really like this. So this is actually on the way to Crater Lake, and it's a place I've driven by maybe 10 times in the past 18 months or so, and I've stopped so many times from the side of the road to look into this several acre woodland, and I've always known there was a shot there, right? You can tell immediately. It's filled with these tall trees with all their foliage, the canopy very high up. So there was almost like a fine art type of photo with just the trunks just waiting to be discovered. So finally, one day, and actually this is one of the problems with the photo, you can see in the background, right, that silver line in the background, that's actually a guardrail. So I'm very close to the side of the road. Anyway, so that's how close I was, but I should have eliminated that, right? Find a composition that doesn't have a guardrail in it. But you really have to look through that photo to see it, so I'm not too concerned. But anyway, on that day, I looked around for maybe 45 minutes, found this dark tree that stood out, and I knew immediately I had something, but I rushed the composition. So I focused on making sure that black tree was in center of frame, which it is, which is lovely, but look at the centering of that tree between the two paler trees in the foreground. It's very close to the one on the right, and there's too much room between the black tree and the one on the left. I need to find a composition that centered that black tree in frame and centered it between these two trees as well. Still, I love this photo. I'll definitely go back there one day, but it can be improved. This next shot is in the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. It is that ridge in the background is actually the same ridge that Buttermilk Falls is on, but I was just driving by this side road one day and spotted this tree that was basically lined up perfectly with that 4x4 path that a truck can go up. So I knew that was the center of the composition, or the main focal point of the composition. So the ridge behind it with the bright colors and that nice fog at the top, and even that sage colored bush, scrub bush in the foreground, on scene was amazing. It called to me, it felt great, but it didn't translate as well as I'd hoped. Not to go back to Kim Zier again, but I'd love to see what she would have done with the scene. Would she have made something like overly saturated, almost glossy like, to really bring out those vibrant colors, right? That wouldn't be my style because I want it to look more natural. But if she had taken that picture, what she would have done is really important to me to find out in the editing process, because I don't know that side, and I want to figure that out. So lovely scene, and it probably looks better than I think it does. It just doesn't quite meet my expectations of what it was like on scene. Okay, this next photo is in Prospect Point Preserve, also very close to my house. It's a place that I shot the time lapse of Liffey Island. So it's a view of one cove in Lake Opakong on a fall day. And what I love about this photo, and I spotted it right away, right? The trio of colored trees that are turning in the fall, with the trio of rocks in the lake as well, right? There's something about that felt balanced to me that I really liked. And then with the colors and the green, I don't know what kind of weeds they're called, the reeds, I thought the picture worked really well. However, on screen now, it's unbalanced, right? The right-hand side of the water needs another rock in it. And maybe at the time I thought these lily pads would provide balance, but they don't stand out enough to me. So maybe a different crop in the future, or again, just a little bit of composition work to really study every inch of the picture, every inch of that frame would go a long way. Still, nice picture, nice scene, a little unbalanced. This 9th photo, what a magical moment. This was Comet Neowise. I was on the scene with my daughter and one of our friends, and we spent hours there that night up in Sunrise Mountain in Stoke State Forest. There were other people there as well. It was during COVID, but it was like this little moment where we forgot all that and just stared at this amazing comet. And you could really, like, when you were in the moment, it wasn't terribly visible with the naked eye, but the minute you put any long exposure on it, it just popped on the back of the camera. It felt so good. So this shot, I love. It's not technically great, right? So I composed it during daylight. No, I did not. I composed it in the dark, which was the problem. And it probably wouldn't have stood out as a problem if the person on the right hadn't turned on their phone. So in the middle of their this 15-second exposure, someone had their cell phone flashlight on and caused a little bit of light painting. So light painting is a great idea, right? With the right composition, this would have been a spectacular photo, but I lucked into it. So the pillar on the left is really coming out of the side of the frame, which is terrible, really awful. And it's overexposed on the right. So with a little bit of foresight, I could have planned for this and done the light painting myself. But still, I love this photo. The stars pop, the comet pops, the pink glow in the sky, all that works to it. And you can see a piece of the pavilion. It just paints the picture of what that night was. So I adore it, but I know it could be better. And lastly, this is my favorite photo of the year. I want to believe, I really do, that this is a standout piece. I don't know that it is, and that's part of the problem, is that I'm doubting what I say there. And I don't know enough yet to say, yeah, there is something special about this photo. So what I like, it was a great, it was a tough day. It was actually raining out and a little bit of cold, but the results were great. So it was a great day to be out shooting, even though the weather was poor. And it was at a point in time in the fall where, at least in this area, the only foliage left was yellow. So this bright, saturated yellow, naturally saturated, was really incredible. And stood out even more with a polarizer on. So you have the river with these lovely rocks to offer a leading line, you know, meandering into the distance with these great banks of yellow foliage on either side, good clouds, and even that little ridge in the background helps too. And when you zoom in, these standing trees with a little bit of green in them standing out from the yellow background, I really love that so much. And even this pool of water on the right hand side just gives it some character. So every corner of this frame has something unique in it, and that's what makes it stand out to me. And I only doubt myself because when I look at it, and frankly when I posted it on Instagram, you know, there were no comments, no hey great shot, and not many likes. So I doubt myself that I'm seeing it correctly. So maybe this really is an outstanding photo, or maybe it just doesn't work for people, and that's okay, right? It doesn't mean that my taste has to match your taste. But either way, I had a great time this day, so I saved that one for last on purpose. I worked hard for this photo. It was in the rain. I spent more time on the composition. I spent more time on the composition of this photo than any other of the year, and I think it paid off. thank you very much for watching. My fingers are numb. I have to get moving, but I appreciate you hanging in there. This was longer than normal, but this really helps me judge my own work and gather my thoughts, and really be constructive about it. So this was probably a week or two in the making in terms of gathering my thoughts to see what I'm doing right or wrong. And I only did that because I thought it would make a great video. So by you watching, you're helping me improve as well. Get out and explore, enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll get some snow.